Hello, my name is Lubomir Jovanovic, and in front of University of Belgrade and in front of our team, I will present you lecture about sheep and goat physiology of the senses, and we will also speak about learning physiology and cognitive physiology, and also we will speak about stress in sheep and goats.
At first, we will say that there is a 9 organ system in human and in animals such as sheep and goats. This is cardiovascular system, digestive system, respiratory system, urogenital system, lymphatic system, musculoskeletal system, nervous system, endocrine system, and cell system. We will now focus on the sense system, because it is very important to understand the behavior of animals. Actually, to understand the sensory worlds of domestic animals, we should mention that there is actually 5 senses in total in human and animal species. And this is the sense of hearing, taste, touch, sight or visual sense, and smell sense. We need to understand what are the main differences in animal and human senses, or to give answers who is superior. As a human beings, we often think that we are superior, and the most important sense in human is visual sense. But the visual sense, we can say that it's not perfect, because we only can see some picture of animal, of man, and there are some, let's say, signs of some kind of behavior which can be recognized better by the animals. Use the most important animal sense in animals is sense of smell and sense of hearing. To understand this and to understand differences between these senses in human and in animal, in the next slide you can see some interesting facts. For example, olfactory mucosa in the dogs. We know that dogs are animals which are superior in smelling among all the animals, but the sense of smelling is also well developed in the sheep and goats. And for example, in the dogs, you can see that olfactory mucosa is much spreader than it is in human. Receptors in dogs are more abundant than in humans. You can see on this slide actually the numbers. Also, if we compare hearing and the sound frequency in humans, sheep, and goat, you can see on this slide the facts and in the table, and you can see what is the lowest frequency detected in humans, sheep, and goat, greatest sensitivity, and highest frequency of hearing. Comparing this number, you can see that actually sheep and goat are more perfect for hearing than it is in human. As we say that the sense of smelling is very important for animals, actually we need to accept and to understand the concept of pheromones. Pheromones are actually odors which remain in the places where individuals have been, and it is produced and by the special glands, and it can be excreted by urine, feces, and saliva. For example, frightened individuals leave the different odors from the calm individuals. Sexually active individuals have different odors from those who are sexually inactive. And there may be differences between more aggressive and more friendly individuals, for example, and those who are less aggressive or more friendly. Actually, every individual can be distinguished from every another individual by specific pheromones. Something which is important, that actually pheromones can left in the place in which animal have been, and even if we remove animals, actually if these animals were, for example, frightened or something like that, their specific odors will be left here, and the animal which will come back to this or some new animals which will be introduced in this place can actually read, we can say, read for the past and to smell these, for example, frightening odors. There is a special organ which is actually involved in the recognizing the pheromones, and it is called the vomeronasal or Jacobson organ. On the picture in this slide, you can see actually a reflex act. We will speak later what are the reflexes. This reflex is called Fleischmann, and you can see specific face expression with of animal with the Fleischmann reflex, and actually probably the most of breeders of sheep and goat see this reflex in their flocks. Actually, in this reflex action, animal try to recognize smelling and to actually receive the pheromones from another animal. And you probably see this reflex in the sexually active animal. It is very important for a breeding season, and for example, pheromones are a kind of communicating the, as we mentioned, sexual communicated with among animals. And for example, breeding season is something which is very important for sheep and dogs, and the most sheep and dogs expose seasonal reproductive activity. It means that high reproductive activities is present in the autumn and the winter. We call them short day species. It means that there is a specific period of year, autumn to winter, where sheep can express signs of estrus and can be mated. If we introduce the ram during the before the breeding season, it can actually cause the beginning of the breeding season. Mainly, the sudden introduction of novel rams can trigger earlier ovulation activity and cyclity on estrus eaves. All this happen actually through the pheromones, and pheromones of the male actually can trigger ovarian activity and cyclity in anestrus eaves. This method is not effective if eaves are already in the breeding season, but we can use this method actually to synchronize estrus in flocks. We mentioned the concept of reflexes when we speak about vomeronasal reaction. Actually, reflexes are very important for animal behavior, and reflexes represented the effective response to receptor stimulation without the influence of the will. On this slide, you can see the simple concept of the reflex in humans, but it is the same with the animals. Actually, when our senses, it is our actually receptor on the of our skin recognize something which can be something which can treat us, and it can be something, for example, hot or something like this. Then we recognized it, and we act without our will, and we remove our hand in this case. But the general reflexes are very important in sheep and goat. There are some important reflexes which we need to understand. The first reflex which we need to understand is cycling reflex, and this is the reflex which with which animal is born, and you probably see it, or you see it when you have young lambs. So cycling is one of the important reflexes in sheep and goats. Also, milking is also a reflex is important for dams, and there is important of good stimulus. Actually, if we milk animals, we try to find the best way to act as this reflex. In the same time, if we milk animal and give some bad stimulus, such as beating animal or making some noise, it can cause a decrease in the milk. Besides this actually is bad for the animal, but it also can cause in decreased milk during decreased milk during the milking. So it is very important to understand the concept of the reflex and importance of good stimulus during a reflex action in animals, especially in this case in sheep and goats. There are two interesting and two important things which we need to mention, and this is habituation and sensitization. Habituation is the warning of a response which could be shown to a repeated stimulus. Sensitization is the increase of the response to repeated stimulus. For example, the sheep would not be likely to habituate to the sight of the hunting wolf. However, indeed, the refires might occur that they would become sensitized. Very important topic in animal and the human behavior is stress. There is no general accepted definition, and there are different definitions actually of the stress. Stress is a state of disturbed balance in the body homeostasis. In the body, balance in body is called homeostasis, during which various mechanisms are involved in order to re-establish the balance. This is one of actual definitions, but as I mentioned, there is a different definition of the stress. It will be easier to understand stress when we try to count the stressors which can cause the stress. At the first, we will mention physical stressor. It is cold, heat, changes in humidity and air flow, immobilization, different types of radiation, noise, vibration, and trauma. Actually, breeders often think that, for example, the cold is a very big cause of the stress in the sheep and goat, but contrarily, heat is a very important stressor for the sheep and goat. We'll speak about it later. There are biological stressors such as overpopulation, presence of the predators. For example, we mentioned the sensitization of the wolf presenters. Infectious diseases can cause biological stress, parasitic, bacterial, virus diseases. And actually, there is not straight border between stress and disease, because stress can lower the animal immune response, and it can cause some diseases. On the other side, some parasitic diseases, for example, can cause stress and provoke some another disease. So there is not strict border, as I mentioned, between stressors and stress and diseases. Psychological stressors act on emotional processes and can cause changes in behavior such as anxiety, fear, anger, and nervousness. Actually, all feelings that we as human population can have, actually the same feelings can have other animals. There are social stressors, for example, animal relocation, change of the owner, date of the owner, and separation of the animal can also cause stress. Many stressors act together, and for example, in the case of transport, there are different stressors which can provoke the stress. Relocation of animal, new ambiental condition can cause stress during the transport. The stressor for one individual does not have to be stressor for another. For example, if you used to breed your flock near some highway, for a long time, the moving of the car will not cause the stress to them. Otherwise, if you move some mountain flock near to some road, then the noise from the car can cause very severe stress to them. Stresses vary in the intensity and duration. There are acute and chronic stress. For example, acute stress is caused by shearing, for example, which is common in spring in sheep, and if you tie animals for a long time, it could cause chronic stress. It is important to recognized animal which is under the stress, and actually there is one hormone which is important and cause signs of the stress. It calls adrenaline. What actually does adrenaline? It can up heart rate. It can increase the blood pressure. It can accelerated breathing. It can dilated pupils and increase body temperature. All these which I mentioned are actually the signs of the stress, and we need to recognize them in order to recognize the animal which is under the stress condition. The final phase of the stress is actually lethargy, so animal is not interesting for environment and inappetence, so animal do not want to eat. And as I mentioned before, it decreases resistance of the organisms, it causes disease, and finally it can lead to the death. So it is very important to cope with the stress and to recognize animal which is under the stress and to cope with the stress. As I mentioned before, heat stress is one kind of the stress which is very important for ruminants in generally, and there are some researches about stress, heat stress in pregnant ruminants in general, and it is very important to emphasize that this kind of stress, heat stress, can disturb the dams and decrease the milk production, the quality of colostrum, but it can also cause long-term effects, negative effects, or their offsprings. So it is very important to cope and to find way how to lower as much as more the heat stress. The most important things is the most important question is how to fight with the stress, and actually the most important things is to detect and remove the stressor if it is possible. But it is not always simple to find the stressor. We sometimes only recognize the animal which is under the stress condition, but we do not know what is stressor which causes this kind of stress. Especially, as mentioned before, in some cases there are two or more stressors which can cause the stress. Generally, we should pay attention on sheep and goat under the stress, find a suitable ambience, and there are some feed supplements such as, for example, chromium, or some feeding and nutrition regimes which can decrease the stress. Once again, it's very important to understand the influence of stress on production of animals, influence of stress on onset of the diseases in the sheep and goat, to find stressors, to find the animals which are under the stress, and to try to avoid stress condition. Thank you for listening.